What up? J-Bone here. I cannot wait to recap the 2022 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix with you all here today. Before we get into today's show, though, I want to quickly remind you that you can buy some awesome Formula Bone merch on bolenmedia.com/shop. That is BOLENMEDIA.com/shop. I currently offer an awesome black denim hat that is embroidered with the Formula Bone Mobile logo, and I wear this hat constantly. I'm actually wearing it right now if you're watching on YouTube. And I also offer a super comfortable Formula Bone F1 Show t-shirt. So check both of those out at bolenmedia.com/shop. And if you have any ideas for Formula Bone or F1 themed in general merch that you'd like me to make, let me know by DMing me. And maybe your dream can become a reality. All right, folks, let's get into it. This is the Formula Bone F1 Show. J-Bone! Welcome back to the Formula Bone F1 Show, the Formula One podcast that is currently embroiled in a fierce legal battle with AlphaTauri in an effort to get them to fix Yuki's freaking car already, okay? Figure it out. I'm Jared Borislow, but you can call me J-Bone. Thank you so much for joining me here today, and away we go. Today's main topic, recapping the 2022 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. First things first, I need to do a quick recap of the absolutely chaotic beginning to this race weekend that had many, many people, including me, doubting that the 2022 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix would even be taking place. Black smoke could be seen billowing in the background of some footage from FP1, and that is because an oil depot 10 kilometers, or about 6 miles east of the Jeddah Corniche circuit, have been hit by a missile fired by the Houthi rebels in neighboring country Yemen, and that caused an absolutely massive, massive blaze in Jeddah. The Houthis fired this targeted missile because Saudi Arabia is currently battling the Houthis in Yemen by way of a proxy war. I recommend reading up on this modern conflict, by the way, because it is causing a massive humanitarian crisis in Yemen and is being underreported on, at least here in America. So FP2 was delayed 15 minutes on Friday so the FIA could brief teams and drivers about what was going on, because obviously I'm sure they were pretty confused at why there's a massive cloud of black smoke kind of nearby. And after that briefing, like I said, that delayed FP2 15 minutes. FP2 then went on as normal. However, later that night on Friday, the quote-unquote unanimous agreement that F1 said that there was to keep racing looked to be untrue, as the drivers met for over 4 hours until around 2 a.m. local time, discussing whether or not to continue with the race weekend due to safety concerns and potentially other concerns as well. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall of that meeting, because that is definitely a historic F1 moment that I hope Drive to Survive was there. I'm sure they were not allowed in. That would be a pretty absurd, access to give to Drive to Survive on a very seemingly private meeting, but you never know. I highly doubt it, though. But I wish I could have been a fly on the wall, because I'm sure that was a very, very interesting room to be in, with the drivers expressing their concerns about whether or not they should boycott the race. In the end, the decision from the drivers was the same. It was to continue racing due to assurances from local authorities that the event would be safe. The next day, on Saturday, it was announced that the Houthi rebels would be entering into a 3-day ceasefire, which you have to wonder if that is something that the drivers and teams were aware of Friday night when they were debating, despite the fact that we all didn't know about it until the next day. I wouldn't be surprised if they're like, hey, we know that the Houthis are going to have a ceasefire, like we're letting you know that it's going to be safe. Whereas all of us, when they said that they were going to keep racing, we did not know that information. And again, I'm not sure if the drivers knew that or not, but I'm speculating here that they might have, which may be factored into their decision to keep racing. So in the end, This will go down as another F1 cash is king controversy to add to the list of times where F1 arguably prioritized money, deal-making, and convenience over more noble causes. But fortunately, the FIA and F1 were correct in their safety judgment, and the rest of the race weekend went on safely. You do have to wonder, though, what this controversy means for the future of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, if anything at all. But like I said, we did race on this past weekend. On my Saudi Arabian Grand Preview podcast last week, I gave you 4 storylines to follow throughout the race weekend. Let's see how those shaped up. Why don't we? The first storyline was about how the 2022 cars would fare at their first ever street circuit, given the fact that they lessened drivers' ability to navigate through narrow spaces by way of the 18-inch tires and the over-wheel winglets. And I can confidently say that after this race, I am no longer worried about the 2022 car's lessened visibility impacting drivers at street circuits. The drivers all looked fine out there. Well, except Latifi. However, I am now worried about what the heck is up with some of these 2022 power units, as they did not have a good weekend, folks. Despite seeing fewer cars involved in crashes than last year's race at Jeddah, this year's race had the same amount of DNFs, as cars just started dropping like flies around lap 35. Within the span of 2 laps 35 and 36, 3 cars powered by 3 different engine manufacturers suffered mechanical malfunctions that ended drivers' races. Daniel Ricciardo and his Mercedes powertrain, El Plando Alonso and his Renault powertrain, and Bottas and his Ferrari powertrain all just crapped out of the race within the same 2 laps. It was absurd. It was like, I actually on Twitter, I was like, okay, everybody, I know you want chaos. I'll do the chaos dance. I did the chaos dance, and then all 3 of them immediately retired. I was like, wow, FBONE contains mythical powers. I don't know which word it is. Mythical? I think it's mystical. I don't know. Maybe it's both. My feeling is that these powertrains just could not handle how full throttle of a circuit Jeddah is for some reason, which has me wondering if we're going to see a similar scene at another similarly fast street circuit in Baku, or maybe another similarly full throttle circuit like Monza. Just something to watch as the season goes on, because that was absurd to see 3 different engines all crap out at the same time in a Grand Prix. Very bizarre. The chaos dance worked. The next storyline had to do with Charles Leclerc's recent street circuit woes. As I mentioned last week, Leclerc had crashed at some point during the race weekend of 3 of the most recent street circuits he'd raced at leading up to this race, including a big crash at Jeddah at the end of the 2021 season that I thought might be weighing on his brain a little bit, you know? Maybe he's like, ooh, I'm kind of scared of these barriers because I keep crashing at street circuits. I thought maybe he'd be racing a little scared. And considering Leclerc set the fastest lap of the race, I think I can firmly say that he was not racing scared in Jeddah. He also even made contact with a barrier at the entry to turn 4 during FP2, so I know he wasn't going out of his way to avoid walls. I'm so happy, by the way, that Leclerc is not racing scared, because you can't race scared when Max is your new rival. And despite how Leclerc lost this battle, the war rages on, and I'm so excited to see a Leclerc-Verstappen title fight continue on throughout this season. And who knows, things could still change up. Maybe that's not even the title fight at the end of the year. It's looking like it will be, but you never know. 2022 is kind of crazy so far. The next storyline was Red Bull's reliability issues, which were a humongous story after their late race double retirement in Bahrain. I think it's safe to say that these are figured out, for now at least, as the Red Bulls were the fastest cars all weekend, taking pole position and the race victory in 2 different cars. That is some fast cars you got there, Red Bull. By the way, when I say all weekend, and I know that the Ferraris were fastest in practice, okay? But I don't count practice times in a team's weekend performance, just qualifying in the race, because practice is not racing. Practice is practice. We're talking about practice, not the race. Not the race. We're talking about practice. Shouts to everyone who gets that reference. My final storyline was, can Haas shock the world again? And the answer is kinda. If you count Mick's horror crash as shocking, thank God he's okay. Or if you count an injured K-Mag's ability to be in the points while holding off Lewis as shocking, then yes, they did shock the world again. But they did not pull off another shocking top 5. So I'd say they did not shock the world, just pleasantly surprised the world. Minus the Mick crash, of course, which was not pleasant whatsoever. I'm happy he's okay. That looked very scary, but he seemed very fine. He seemed like he could have even raced if they didn't want to, I know they didn't end up fixing the car up because they wanted to make sure they were fine for the Australian Grand Prix. But hey, that's fine. Would have liked to see Mick race, but I get why they didn't put him in the car. And I'm glad he's okay. Of course, I need to now check in with you all regarding how my pre-race weekend top 5 finishers prediction played out. As you know, before every Grand Prix this season, I will be giving my pre-race weekend, so before any practice, top 5 prediction. It's very hard to get a top 5 right before a race weekend, but I'm out here trying. And with my order of Max, Charles, Carlos, Lewis, K-Mag, I had the entire podium correct. Okay, guys and gals, the entire podium, 1, 2, 3, Max, Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, which is pretty dang good for a pre-weekend prediction. A lesser Formula One content creator would only predict the podium each week because it's way, way, way easier, but it's also way, way, way less fun. And you look way, way, way less cool than when you predict the top 5 and are right. So I'll continue predicting top 5s until and before and after I get one right. I might never get one right. Doesn't matter. I'm not going to stop. You can't stop me. Don't try. Speaking of J-Bone's predictions, I need to give a major update on the Mercedes driver number conspiracy that I recently discussed here on the Formula Bone F1 show. In case you were not aware, I recently made a video about my conspiracy theory that Mercedes made the driver numbers on the front of their cars more visible this year because these numbers needing to be clearly visible is an obscure rule that I believe Mercedes intend to use against another team this season to get them in trouble. In Saudi Arabia, you may have noticed that Ferrari went ahead and also made their driver numbers more visible. Now, I'm just a humble man who podcasts from a child's race car bed. Okay, I don't like to give myself too much credit, but my conspiracy theory video has done around 5 million views across social media, so I think there's a good chance that Ferrari saw it, decided that it's better to be safe than sorry in case I end up being right, and to add those neon accents to their numbers to make them more visible just in case. Who knew the Formula Bone F1 show could make such waves? J-Bone! This episode of the Formula Bone F1 show is brought to you in part by my favorite leg garment manufacturers, Birddogs. I wear Birddogs shorts, pants, and joggers constantly. I'm wearing the joggers right now, in fact, and in doing so, I have to constantly fight the urge to get up from my race car bed and jog around the studio. Birddogs built-in underwear, yes, built-in underwear, feels better on my skin than the finest cashmere and is also super breathable and does not bunch up like traditional underwear does. You can get Birddogs shorts, pants, and joggers with or without the built-in underwear, but I highly recommend getting it with because it is the best. And it also cuts your laundry down substantially because you can throw out all your non-built-in underwear and just wash your Birddogs at the same time as the built-in underwear inside the Birddogs. That's how it works. It's the old 2-for-1. The old 2 washes for the price of 1 trick, thanks to Birddogs. Head to birddogs.com and get yourself the best shorts, pants, and joggers on planet Earth. And do not forget to use my code FBONE so that they throw in a free whistle tip football. Yes, I said whistle tip football. You throw it, it thanks you for throwing it by whistling at you. How nice. Go to birddogs.com right now. Load your cart up with the best shorts, pants, and joggers available on planet Earth. Plug in promo code FBONE, F-B-O-N-E, to get your free whistling football and live happily ever after. That's birddogs.com, promo code FBONE. There's a link for that deal in the description of this episode. Thank you to Birddogs for supporting the Formula Bone F1 show. Next up, it is time to respond to some Saudi Arabian Grand Prix themed voicemails left by Formula Bone F1 show listeners. After every race this season, I'll be doing one of these race recap podcasts that you're listening to right now. And a large part of them will be me responding to some of the voicemails left by Formula Bone F1 show listeners on the Bone phone, 1-833 888-200-0966. So during or after each race, whenever you have an interesting thought, hot take, complaint, or anything else like that, make sure to give the Bone phone a ring for a chance at your call being played on the podcast. And if you do call in, but don't end up having your call played, don't worry. It doesn't mean it was a bad call. I just don't have time to get to every call every week. So just keep on calling in and you'll get on eventually. Without further ado, here is the first call.
Hey, J-Bone. This is Ryan from the dairy farm. I'm absolutely gutted for Checo. There's no doubt in my mind that he would have won that race. He had the pace. If they would have just let Charles pit first, an easy win, slipping through his hands. Maybe not easy, but easy enough.
I, too, am unbelievably gutted for Checo. Perez notched his first ever pole position on Saturday after 218 Grand Prix without one, which was the record for most Grand Prix without a pole position by a whopping 37 races. Okay, so nobody in the history of F1 has ever wanted a pole more than Checo, and he freaking got it. And then on Sunday, he also had an amazing first tire stint and definitely looked to have the pace to win this race. He definitely looked like he had the pace to win this race, okay? But luck is, of course, part of the game. And Latifi's crash and the ensuing virtual safety car and then full safety car ended up ruining Checo's potentially P1 day, just like it could have massively helped him out if it had come at a different time, you know? Luck's the name of the game. It happens. It can really help you. It can really hurt you. I feel terrible for Checo, but he seemed to take all this, with a good attitude like he typically does. And, man, that Latifi crash could not have come at a worse time for Checo. Literally could not have come at a worse time for Checo. Speaking of Latifi.
What up, J-Bone? It's Ryan calling from San Angelo, Texas. And after watching the race, me and my roommate had a very similar thought. Now, we know why Latifi's in Formula One, but surely if he keeps on crashing cars like he is, he's not going to have a seat next year, will he? You think he's going to go anywhere? Think he's going to stay? Is Cash still king? I don't know. That's why I called in. Have a good episode.
Latifi is complicated because, yes, he is definitely in Formula One right now, due in very large part to his father being a billionaire who sponsors Williams. But I do want to point out that doesn't make him the same as Mazepin, okay? Because Mazepin never finished higher than 5th place at the end of a Formula 2 season, whereas Latifi put together a great F2 season in 2019 and finished 2nd. So you can at least look at his achievements before F1 and not say he has no business being in a seat, even though he didn't get into racing until he was 13, which is kind of sus. It's kind of late to get into racing if you're going to be a Formula One driver. But, maybe he's a prodigy. I think we all know now that's not necessarily the case. But anyways, Latifi also out-qualified a great driver in George Russell twice last year. So at the very least, he has some racing skills, okay? Unlike Mazepin, who never really proved anything to anybody. However, Latifi has been awful recently, okay? He has been in awful form ever since his infamous 2021 season-defining crash at the end of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix that unfortunately saw him get a ton of unwarranted hate and even death threats. If you gave Nicholas Latifi a death threat, you are such a loser. Like, what? He accidentally crashed while trying to race Mick Schumacher, and it somehow, by the way the universe works, ended up making your driver not win. And you're going to tell this man you want to kill him. Absurd. Latifi is having a very tough time adjusting to Williams' 2022 car. He finished last in Bahrain qualifying, where he qualified 6 positions behind his teammate Alex Albon, who made it into Q2, actually, in that car. And then, of course, Latifi crashed twice this past weekend at Jeddah, once during Q1 and once during the race, both times looking to be totally his fault, with him losing the rear in qualifying and then getting on the throttle too early during the race. His contract ends at the end of this season. Now, Cash is definitely still king, as this weekend has shown all of us. But if Latifi keeps this up, I definitely do not think they'll be retaining his services unless they really, really need his father's money. But crashes are also expensive, so he might be making it not even worth his father's money if he keeps crashing like this. So we shall see the future of Nicholas Latifi. Probably around the end of this season, we'll know what's going on. Next call.
What's up, J-Bone? This is Christian from Chicago. I just have to say the new regulations that they put in place this year, a little bit skeptical going in, but after watching last race and this race this afternoon, I'm really pleased with what they did. It just feels like it makes for a much more exciting race, more parity, levels the playing field a bit. I'm sure, as the season goes on, the top 2 or 3 teams are really going to pull away, but made for a really exciting race today.
I could not agree more. I love the more level playing field, for now at least, and the ability for cars to follow more closely and kind of go back and forth like we see Max and Charles Leclerc keep doing. The craziest thing to see, for me, has been the new way of battling where you try to get as close as you can to the car in front of you, which is much closer now than it was last year, while also being second to the DRS detection line behind that car. That double lockup that we saw with Max and Leclerc as they both wanted to be the one getting DRS was an incredible example of how racing in 2022 under the new regulations is way different than racing in 2021 was. Support for the Formula BONE F1 show is also brought to you by MyBookie, where you can win money using your knowledge of F1 and other sports like college basketball, because it is, of course, March Madness right now. From all of the biggest games to the smallest events, make every bet worth your while with MyBookie on their website, MyBookie.ag. And right now, you can start your MyBookie journey off by getting a deposit bonus before you even place a bet because of MyBookie's first deposit bonus promotion. All you have to do is sign up and make your first deposit using my exclusive promo code FORMULA at MyBookie.ag to get a deposit bonus applied to your account. Stipulations apply, so make sure you read through those before you deposit. Right now, they have World Drivers' Championship odds that look pretty tasty if you're a Ferrari fan, okay? You can get Leclerc to win this year's World Drivers' Championship at plus 125 right now, meaning you'll get your money back plus win 1.25 times your original wager if it hits. If you think you know F1, put your effing money where your F1 mouth is. Head to mybookie.ag today to redeem your deposit bonus so you can get in the game and start winning big today. That's promo code FORMULA to receive a deposit bonus instantly in your account. No hassle, no wait, stipulations apply. There's a link for that deal in the description of this episode. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie at mybookie.ag, promo code FORMULA. Thank you to MyBookie for supporting the Formula BONE F1 show. Time for some more voicemails.
Hey, what's up, J-Bone? This is Scott from Seattle calling. I want to talk about Mercedes' race, especially Hamilton. Started so far back and then bounced down all the way up to 6th. And then after he pitted, just stuck in 10th. Kind of curious your thoughts of why he couldn't make that final push. Seems like he was passing everyone. And then right at the end there, just kind of slowed down and stayed his position. Anyways, take it easy.
So here is the crazy story of Lewis Hamilton's 2022 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Hamilton's push up the grid from P15 all the way to P6 was super entertaining to watch, but it was all because of a super aggressive tire strategy Mercedes decided to whip out as a means of making up for how Lewis did not make it out of Q1 in qualifying, which still blows my mind that I'm saying that. Lewis's first tire stint lasted 40 laps, which was the longest stint of the day, and the reason why he was able to make up so many positions in those first 40 laps. Now, a key part of Lewis's strategy, though, was Mercedes banking on a virtual safety car and or safety car that would afford Lewis a cheap pit stop. And while Lewis got that virtual safety car right around when he would have wanted it, around lap 37, and what would have been almost a dream scenario for Lewis and Mercedes, some crazy things happened that really hurt Lewis and allowed him to not take advantage of this virtual safety car. First, Lewis thought Alonso was going slow due to the double-waved yellows, not because his car was crapping out on him, which made Lewis lose an estimated 6 seconds by not overtaking Alonso because he thought he wasn't allowed to. Then, Lewis thought the pit lane entry was closed because Ricciardo's car was essentially parked in it, leading Lewis to not box when he actually still could have right before the pit lane entry was closed. Now, not only did this prevent Lewis from coming out of the pits in 8th place instead of the 14th place he came out at when he eventually pitted, but it also allowed Kevin Magnussen, who was behind Lewis, to get his cheap pit stop in just before pit lane entry was closed. Lewis was then able to make up some positions after pitting, but was ultimately unable to ever get past Kevin Magnussen later in the race after both had pitted, as K-Mag's pace on his similarly aged tires was too much for Lewis. I love that that's a sentence I can say. Lewis says he didn't pit initially because, quote, I saw Alonso slowing down. It was double yellow flags, so I didn't push to overtake him. Then Daniel was stuck in the pit lane, so I didn't know if I could go in with a car sitting there. It was just not great. I agree, Lewis. It was absolutely not great for you. You know, who knows where Lewis could have finished? Potentially as high as P6? I would guess he probably would have finished more in the P7, P8 range. But a truly confusing situation that I hope I explained well for you. It's time for some shout-outs now. Shout out Jeff Leeper for winning $100 on a $5 bet by taking the Checo to win qualifying long shot betting tip that I gave out on Twitter before qualifying. Bone Stradamus strikes again. I've got the Ferrari conspiracy theory checking out. I've got this bet checking out. I've got my prediction of the podium checking out. Things are looking good for J-Bone, aka Bone Stradamus right now, folks. Shout out Rich K for sharing the podcast with your friend and sending me a screenshot of you sharing it with your friend. Word of mouth and recommendations to friends are the number one way you can help me grow Formula Bone into being the biggest Formula One brand it can be, so I really appreciate any and all recommendations. Shout out to everyone who called into the Bone phone after the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. That number again is 1-833-200-0966 for a chance to have your voicemail played on the podcast. Shout out, as always, to everyone in the Formula Bone Discord, which you can join via the invite link in the description of this episode. DM me, by the way, if you want to be shouted out at the end of the episodes. Before I get going, I'd like to run you through the links that I've placed in the description of this episode. You can chat with me as I live stream myself talking F1, playing the F1 video game, and opening packs of F1 trading cards on twitch.tv/FormulaBone. You can help support the Formula Bone F1 show financially by buying Formula Bone merch at bolenmedia.com/shop. You can support the show financially in an even greater capacity by supporting today's sponsors. Shop Birddogs at birddogs.com with promo code FBONE for a free whistle tip football with your order of the best shorts, pants, and joggers on the planet. You can bet Formula One and March Madness with MyBookie using promo code FORMULA at MyBookie.ag for a double deposit bonus. Stipulations apply. You can join the 200-plus member Formula Bone Discord server with the invite link I've placed in the description of this episode. And again, every link I just mentioned can be found in the description of this episode. You can also follow me, J-Bone, everywhere on social media at Jared Borislow. That's JaredBorislow. And if you're now all caught up on the Formula Bone F1 show, but want to keep hearing my voice, I co-host a comedy podcast called the Bolen Podcast, where we share a ton of laughs covering a wide variety of topics, including current events, non-F1 sports. We just put up a video breaking down the Will Smith, Chris Rock slap that you probably saw on the internet, so you can check that out. You can check out the Bolen Podcast wherever you're listening to this podcast right now. That's ROSSBOLEN, the Ross Bolen Podcast. Folks, it's time for the NPR-style sign-off. The Formula Bone F1 show is recorded in Austin, Texas, and brought to you by Bolen Media. It's hosted by me, Jared J-Bone Borislow, and I also produce the show because I'm a content machine. Kate Orris, Michael Heim, and I make all the podcast clips that you see on social media at Formula Bone. Our iconic theme music and Twitch stream music is by 7 to Midnight. You can follow him on social media at 7 TO Midnight. You can follow the show on social media by following at Formula Bone everywhere. You can watch the show on YouTube by searching Formula Bone. And you can help the show gain new listeners by rating and reviewing the Formula Bone F1 show on Apple Podcasts, and by rating it on Spotify, and by sharing it with your friends. Until next time, J-Bone!